Joining us now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline is Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. BC, what's going on, man?
Not a lot. How you guys doing?
BC, long time no chat, man. I'm not gonna put you on the hot seat so you hurt my feelings and say no, but did you miss me? No, I'm kidding. How you been, man?
I feel good. It feels good to hear your voice, Damon. It buoyed my spirits. I haven't even had a cup of coffee yet, but that was all I needed.
Let's go. Let's
Got the blood pumping. He's ready.
so Ravi and we're trying not to kill each other over this whole buyout contract clause thing, and I was explaining to him, BC, like, for him, and I get it. I'll let him explain more if he'd like, but he's like, listen, paying buyouts shows me you're committed to winning. Like, you're doing to take what's necessary. And this was on the heels of UCLA and their position and Tony White. And I told him this is still a lot of the same fan base that is upset at all the money that was going out of the window and doors for contracts here at Nebraska. Where do you think we lie as a fan base on buyouts and expenses?
It's always dangerous to speak for everybody. I think people don't like when it's just reckless, where you're reckless with your money over there. But I also think there's people like me, and I'm guessing Ravi I did hear a little bit of this segment, that sometimes are like, you know what, whatever you got to do, as long as your head's above water, I'm not overly worried about it. The one that really cracks me up actually is the worry about whether Nebraska's like paying their $7 million pool to their assistants or not. And there's like people kind of worry about it, and I'm like, who cares if you can secure the staff you want for like $5.6 million? Isn't that better than just giving money to give money? So, you don't want to be like foolish with how you're doing contracts and putting them together. And there might have been a stretch there where Nebraska fans thought there was a little bit of that going on, and maybe some extensions given a little earlier than they should have been in some cases that I think we all know about. And I think those are fair points for people to kind of question and say, yeah, was that really the best move that's ever been done around here? But for the most part, it feels like things are kind of back on track with that here. I didn't see everything with UCLA's buyout with their money situation there, but if it comes down to like $800,000 or $1 million or whatever, and the difference is between one coach and another, I'd be annoyed if that was the separating point for me getting the guy I really want. But I think they did get the guy they want. I don't know that they got the best guy. That's all.
Yeah, BC, I mean, basically, my standpoint is just sort of, don't keep throwing good money after bad, right? Like, yes, the extensions were bad money, but what's the alternative? You just keep a coach because that's bad because you don't want to pay the buyout. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what the alternative is there.
Yeah, I don't know. And by the way, I said get the guy they want. I think they got the guy the AD wants at UCLA. Our message board on 24/7 Sports for UCLA was very pro Tony White, for what it's worth. That was felt like 85 to 90% of the people on there wanted him. So I was watching that one closely, guys, all weekend, because there's a lot of sentiment for him from fans, at least, that thought he would be a great hire, and I tend to agree with them.
BC, do you think there's something said to being able to hire a sitting head coach, or is that overstated?
Oh, I think there's sometimes value if he's, has some proof of success with it. Sometimes if it's just a guy who's been very middling, I think it leaves something to be desired. Like, I get it. Like, if we're talking about like a PJ Fleck, and maybe he's not everybody's cup of tea with his personality or whatever, but
definitely proven.
You can look at what he's done at Minnesota, and I think I go up to Minnesota quite a bit for stuff. I think he's kind of taken for granted sometimes. Like, I feel like there's a little bit of that Iowa State syndrome I've seen with them before, where like Dan McCarney back in the day built it up and then was a victim of his own success. And then I think Matt Campbell's ran into that a little bit recently too. I think some of that goes on in Minnesota. But anyway, like a guy like Fleck, I can see where, there'd be some reservations about like his personality, how it'd fit in that climate and stuff. But I would like the fact that he has actually built stuff up at multiple programs. That would be a case where a sitting head coach would be really, that piece of it would be appealing to me. But we've also seen examples now, I think, of guys, like who make the jump from coordinator to head coach, and it's pretty good early, like Lanning. And I mean, there's guys who pick this stuff up pretty fast, and if they've got the right traits for it, why stand in the way? And that's where I think Tony, when he does get his shot at it, I think he'll be successful, because I just think he's got that demeanor where he can stay even enough in dealing with all the outside pressures when he talks to the media and stuff like that. But also I know that he's got a commanding presence in the respect of all his defenders over there. So I think when you just listen to him and you watch him, he's got all this stuff, whether, he hasn't been a head coach yet, but at some point you got to make that jump. And I think he will do well when he does it.
We're talking to Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. BC, when I'm looking at the hiring of Deshaun Foster as opposed to a guy like Tony White, even if you can't land a sitting head coach, it seems like the opinion of the players played a huge factor in going with Deshaun Foster. I guess how much concern, and maybe concern is the right word because it's UCLA and you don't care if they're good or not, but I guess how concerned would you be if something
they are in the conference?
Yeah, that's fair. How concerned would you be if something like that happened at a school you were covering or a school you cared about, where the players currently on the team had what appears to be an outsized say in who ended up being their head coach?
Yeah, I'd be a little worried about it, honestly. I get it to some degree. You got to factor in their opinions, and if you've got a no-brainer hire like right there in front of you, sometimes you do go with that. But I'm
not sure a running backs coach qualifies as a no-brainer hire. You know what I mean?
No, I don't think so either. I think you got to look at a situation like they're in as if you have to burn a few things down the first year or two, so goes it, to look at it as like a 5-year type of deal. Now that's very difficult to convince people about in this day and age. That's the problem. That's the thing that's going to be an issue at a lot of places, is there are certain jobs that I think would take 4 to 6 years, honestly, to build it properly and get it where, you actually gave that head coach a fighting shot to build it the way it should be built and to get it to where you want it to be. But the problem is you're not going to get you're not going to get that time anymore. When I was a kid, there were, Damon will remember this, like there were coaches that lasted they weren't always great coaches or didn't build it, but I mean, they would last like 6, 7, 8 years sometimes at Big 8 schools that were really scuffling. They'd at least get a chance to do it their way. And nowadays, everything is like, okay, after year 3, this is what's happened. It's over sort of feeling. So I think the AD at UCLA probably did get caught up in a lot of the sentiment of the players and his personal attachment on that one. And maybe it's going to end up being a great hire. I don't love it off the bat, but we'll see. He could prove everybody wrong, and he could just take off. And you know me, I'm just a huge Tony White fan, so I'm happy that Nebraska gets to keep him for another year and build this thing, because I think what Matt Rhule said on his radio show last night is accurate. If Tony's here for another year or two, he's going to get a lot of cracks at things, because it's set up really to be very good on that side of the ball. I think we're their top 10, top 15 defense the next couple of years. But you still got to go out and do it. And if he does, I think he'll get a job next year. I'd be kind of surprised if he doesn't.
Wow. Ravi, Lulla, L2, and BC here for hating on running backs and coaches.
No, just guys, they're just position coaches who have not done anything else getting head coaching jobs. That's what I'm hating on.
BC, I'm learning in a hurry.
Yeah.
Listening to this the past week, and obviously having a good relationship with Coach White, the difference between being emotionally invested and being personally invested. I actually think they can be the same thing, but this time for me, they're not. My emotions are always I'm always emotionally invested in Nebraska. Now it's personal. And I'm thinking to myself, listening to you guys talk about kind of the relationships in players, I almost think we undersell that a little bit in terms of players, because I know right here in our very own backyard, the offensive line, like 99 percentile, was in favor of Donnie Raiola coaching them and coming back. That was important to Coach Rhule, right? Whether Tony White was going to come back or not, like, I know that, like, that was important in our household with the player, from a player's standpoint. Like, so I can't wait to see kind of how it plays out over time between being emotionally invested, like as players, and, oh man, I really feel attached to this coach. That's enough to overcompensate for, like, let's say, a bad play call or some sort of scheme deficiency, versus, wow, this guy's proven. He's got a ton of know-how. He may not connect, but the regimen will get us by in the meantime with his experience. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's a good point, especially with Donnie, from an assistant coach's perspective, because Rhule mentioned that multiple times. Yeah, multiple times, where he's never had a situation where, like even an outgoing transfer is standing on the table, for this guy and saying, yeah, he's the right guy for that. And that, you know what, when Rhule said that, and you could tell also, not that I did trust Rhule, but you heard it from players as well. That did do something to me, where I was like, they see this every day, and everybody's spouting opinions sort of about Donovan Raiola based off a very difficult year to work through that last season before Rhule got here. Maybe the players who saw it every day know a little bit more than everybody else on the outside. And so I really took that into account. So I don't want to dismiss what happened at UCLA with, like, those guys saw it on the ground level, and how invested a coach is in it and in them, and they believe in it. My thought with that is, with that head coaching spot, you do need to weigh that in, but you also, man, it's such a big decision for that job. Like, sometimes you have to go against the grain. I think if you feel like you got a better option, and you might have to, some of the stuff might burn down for a year or two, but if you feel like you got a better pick elsewhere, go that way. But maybe the AD didn't, and that's their pick, and so be it. I think Nebraska's thankful that it turned out that way, because they got a really good football coach for another year.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7.
Hopefully 2 or 3.
BC.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Ideal, right? I feel like I'm sort of talking out of both sides of my mouth here, because I am thrilled that Tony White is staying at Nebraska. I'm also, I think, upset on his behalf that he didn't get the offer to coach at UCLA. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just because what do you think of it?
I feel like he deserved the opportunity, whether he wanted to say yes or no. Like, I wanted him to stay because he wanted to still be here, not because he didn't get the offer.
And we don't know. Maybe
he did. Maybe he did. I don't know that, but that's the perception is they chose Foster over him. Gotcha. And now I'm mad on his behalf.
No, I get it. I think there's a lot of fans like that around here. I'll tell you what, there's a few coaches who have come in a year and have the Q rating or whatever they go by, like, where you're just popular. Like, I mean, he's that guy around here right now, and so everybody wants that to continue and to see where they build this thing off of last season. But I think there's a complete understanding and hope for him to be able to make that next move. And I think Rhule, when you listen to him, wants to have that situation where his guys branch out over time, and you're having the type of success where you build that coaching tree, because it means things are going really well in your house. So your sentiment, I think, is actually quite a popular one around the state.
BC, what did you make of Thomas and kind of his first go around with handling the media? It's crazy, and I know they've worked together, and I should not be surprised, but the common language, the tie that binds, the using of the word trust, the understanding roles. I'm like, why am I even surprised that insert different coach to sound the same even as a new hire?
Yeah, he sounded like one of us, as they say. I guess on the shirt.
It's crazy.
But yeah, he definitely did. I think this is a no-brainer hire all the way around, and I've thought it more and more in the last week or so as I've kind of just looked at his background. And I've said this a couple times, but every coach, if you go anywhere in the country, you go look at his bio, he'll have like 5 or 6 players maybe that are in that bio. It's like, oh, he worked with so-and-so, right, who was like a 3rd-round draft pick and this and that. And sometimes you got to be careful with those because you'll read them and you'll be like, yeah, he did work with this one coach, did work with this guy for a year maybe, but you kind of don't see where that coach was really the influence that got that guy to the league or something. When I look at Glenn Thomas's bio and you think about specifically the names of PJ Walker and Charlie Brewer, that's a case where it's very legit. It's like, man, that's true. That he had such an impact on the growth of those players who nobody was talking a whole lot about, and he got some time with them. There were cases where they were, he got them young in their college careers, and you saw the development. And you saw PJ Walker actually get to the league, and Charlie Brewer had a great college career, and then he had Cameron Friel at UNLV, who was a all Mountain West freshman of the year. So when you kind of go back and just study it, you're like, man, his situation fits perfectly with where Nebraska is right now with, 2 freshman QBs, 2 guys where they're going to, as they say, start from the ground up. And, he's going to meet them where they are, figure out some of the things they got to change, but do it, as Rhule said last night, at the pace that is, right for each player. So it just sounds like Rhule has complete comfort in, he knows those QBs are getting the training he wants. He can not even worry about that. It's going to be done right. And, then we'll, at some point, the head coach will make a decision on like what the pecking order is and all that stuff. But you're getting the good teaching that gets you to that point. So I feel really strongly about that hire, that it's sort of like, after it happened, you're like, why would they done anything else? Kind of, it just fits right to me.
BC, do you wonder at all why that choice wasn't made last year? I know that there was the Jake Peets thing, right, where they thought he was going to come in and be a quarterback coach. Do you wonder at all why they didn't just get the band back together right away and go to Glenn Thomas and say, hey, let's do this thing the way we always have? Like that part of it seemed a little strange to me when it kind of ends up being that way anyway.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I mean, I do know there was a report about Pete's last year in like a couple of days where everybody thought that was going to happen, and Sat would coach tight ends then, and that would be it. And so I don't know on the Glenn Thomas angle why at that moment it wasn't right. But sometimes other guys have something in the fryer over here, and this guy's got, it has to always kind of match up. So who's to say? But it just felt like for right now where they were, he's a guy who I like it on game day too. Like I like the fact that you have a QB's coach in Glenn Thomas who, with those, let's say you have a freshman starter, over on the sideline, he can just have that time with the player one-on-one and be in his headspace a little bit. And, then Satterfield's thinking about the big picture over here. And I like the collaboration piece too. And, that's last night. Rhule said coordinator is not just a title like co-OC that I give to somebody just to get them here. Mm-hmm. This is somebody I've trusted with my offenses and Glenn Thomas to design offenses before, to call plays. I just believe in him in that way. And I don't think this is a deal where he's known Satterfield for 20 years. Satterfield was the guy who at Temple brought up his name, actually. So, I mean, it feels like a good connection there, too, for Sat. I just think Sat's in a good spot with it, with somebody he trusts and knows well, and they're not going to have to do a lot of catch-up in how they want to operate in the spring. And it just seems to fit in a lot of ways. And I like that Satterfield can work with the tight ends, too, which I think is just a fascinating position group as you're trying to design this offense. You know, they always say positionless. Well, the tight end's that spot where you can do so many unique things with it. It kind of makes sense that he's directly connected to those guys.
BC, I felt like we kind of buried the lead after signing day. Rhule's presser, where he went in depth about Sat, and he said he's really aggressive, and sometimes you can't always be aggressive at the quarterback spot, and then what the tight ends needed and its degree of difficulty in terms of concepts and his experience. I always say, as long as the media, hearing it through the media, isn't the first time you've heard something and it's been conveyed to you, it's probably cool to say out loud. Mm-hmm. But I still think that delivery and his summation of that relationship basically told me all I needed to know about Coach Rhule's personality. He's constantly evaluating. He's constantly tinkering. But most importantly, the open lines of dialogue where nobody's left wondering, well, I didn't see that coming. Do you know what I mean? Like, he laid it out there and just kept on moving like no big deal.
You know what? He packs a lot into his pressers. Like, if you go back to the one that happened, he did one like 2 or 3 days after the Iowa game. And he was already moving on, and he was getting asked about sort of like, okay, what are you going to do with your coaching setup? You got anything to say there? And, he said, I got to look things over and all that. But he also told us, he's like, yeah, of course, last year, that original plan was to have Satterfield work with the tight ends and all that. And he just keeps going. But it's like, you know what? He told you what he's going to do right there. Like, after the Iowa press conference, there was. And so I like that. You know what I also like, Damon, is just not being wishy-washy about what roles are. And I know you can't always let everybody inside the kitchen, right? You can't let the whole public in on everything. Yeah. But we've had this deal where we go round and round sometimes. It happens more in season, but it's like, who's calling the plays? Is it this guy getting like 30% of the calls? And he just put that to bed for this offseason. He's like, he loves the Glenn Thomas hire, but he's like, that's the guy at the front of that room, and he made that clear. And I thought that was a really good thing to just like, that's what it is right now, and that's how we're proceeding.
Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. BC, great stuff as always. We'll talk to you again next week.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
That's Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. Coming up next, Andy Kendi from KETV here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.